Fort Stanton in southern New Mexico was built by Union soldiers in 1855 to serve as a base of operations against the Mescalero Apache Indians. In 1896, Fort Stanton was abandoned by the Army and closed. 3 years later, in 1899, the abandoned military fort in Lincoln County, New Mexico, was acquired by the U.S. Public Health Service as a tuberculosis hospital for the Merchant Marine. The location was selected for its healthful climate and served some 5,000 affected sailors between 1899 and 1953.
Welcome to the Fort Stanton Public Health Service Hospital. This hospital building was actually established in 1936 and is one of the main hospitals in this area at that time frame. It even has one of the state's first electrical elevators. The story of the Public Health Service here at Fort Stanton actually goes back to April 1st of 1899 though, when President McKinley actually signed an executive order making Fort Stanton the nation's first federally run tuberculosis sanatorium. The hospital itself was actually dedicated to just the Merchant Marines. The reason for this was because the Assistant Surgeon General of the Merchant Marines petitioned President McKinley to actually do something about the TB patients that were actually coming from his service due to the Spanish-American War. Dr. Carrington, who was one of the first medical directors here at Fort Stanton, he was actually from 1900 to 1908. He did a lot of research into tuberculosis and trying to understand it, as well as develop an effective cure. And really by 1908, through his research, he was able to show that if you had stage 1 tuberculosis, you had a 24% chance of surviving compared to any other sanatorium in the nation if you followed his regimen. As well as if you had stage 3 tuberculosis, which you were confined to a building just like this one. You were not allowed to go outside, you were not allowed to play cards, chess, or checkers because it was too exciting. You were pretty much just bedridden, had to eat around 4,000 calories a day, require a lot of fresh air, your windows were pretty much always open, but also dental care was a huge part of the actual treatment as well. A lot of people don't understand hygiene at that time as well, so it was kind of a revolutionary thing that Dr. Carrington was having people go to the dentist almost 2-3 times a day, but at the same point he slacked on other aspects of hygiene where you were only required to change your clothes 1 day a week. But you actually had to take them off and air them out every single night. And at that time, you were also required to bathe once a week. Some of the other huge parts of the treatments were actually radiology. Radiology was actually a kind of a new invention when it came here to Fort Stanton in 1899. X-rays were really only being taken for about 4 years at that time because it wasn't really discovered until about 1895. So they were trying to understand how to actually take proper x-rays to view tuberculosis itself, but they did it with such great success that they continued using it and became a very popular method. At the same point, we have a surgical table. It's a Belfort from 1922. That table was actually used for quite a variety of other procedures to try to relieve tuberculosis, including lung pulling and also even removing lungs entirely. One of the last major things that actually contributed to Dr. Carrington's success on especially expanding Fort Stanton was his laboratory facility. One of the things that he did in his laboratory was, since they understood it was a bacteria, but they didn't know how to kill it, every single time a patient would die, they would try a different method to actually cleanse the room of tuberculosis. One of the more drastic ones that I've actually read from Carrington's research is he took formaldehyde gas and sprayed it throughout one of the living rooms here at Fort Stanton. He would then have his laboratory team come in, do an entire cotton swab of the area, put it into a microscope and a liquid injection, inject it into a guinea pig, because there was a guinea pig facility here, and they would see if the guinea pig would live. If it did, they would try that method a second time. If the guinea pig died, they would do an autopsy and see exactly how the tuberculosis affected them. So there was an actual animal testing facility here at Fort Stanton, but because of that research specifically, Dr. Carrington's research is still being used today to try to find a permanent cure for tuberculosis, because right now all we have is basically a vaccination to it. It's something that actually had a complete cure yet, and that's what they're still trying to find today. Because of the population increase, a lot of people here at Fort Stanton wanted more things to do in this area. It was kind of chosen as a secluded location because they didn't want tuberculosis to spread, but in the same aspect, they almost needed to make it its own sustainable community. They added a movie theater, and by 1912 got one of the first movie projectors in this area that actually showed silent movies. They actually had their own grocery store, their own post office. They built their own power plant. They had their own gardens, especially around their tuberculosis huts. They were all allowed to eat and do their own little gardening to actually raise food for themselves. So there was a lot of different things that actually contributed to the area, but more importantly was probably their dairy area. Milk was a huge part of their actual treatment, as well as eggs and cattle. So they would actually have all of the staff and the patients working out there as well, because they would need to raise money for the community to actually help sustain the facility as well.
The U.S. Marine Hospital Sanatorium, as it was first called, would usher in new treatments of tuberculosis, the leading cause of death in America. The hospital helped to put the territory on the map as a major health destination.
Fort Stanton was the nation's best sanatorium, and he was actually quoted saying that multiple times. The population ended up starting to boom so much that even by 1920, 10% of the state's population was in sanatoriums, just like Fort Stanton. So it had a huge impact on the actual way people viewed us, as well as the increase in the population to help us become a state in 1912.
In 1936, the sanatorium building included the installation and maintenance of New Mexico's first electric elevator, and the new technology allowed patients to move between floors with little exertion. The TB Sanatorium at Fort Stanton treated an estimated 10,000 patients during its 54 years of operation. The hospital building at the fort is now open to the public for touring.